All right. Okay, another Friday. We are back with In the Know. My name is Olga Bolotina. I'm your host today. And as always, I'm very excited about my guest. His name is Jeff Butts, and he is the Eagle SkyeNet founder, and a person who I am hoping to learn a lot about eagles and what we can do to preserve their habitat. I need to catch my breath. I'm so excited that I'm like out of breath here. And also why they come, why they go, what helps us to bring the eagles back. I know that probably for a lot of people in the United States, eagle represent, especially bald eagle, represent the pride of the country. So I hope that's going to be a captivating and very informative discussion, which we already had actually about, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, right? And I already felt, Jeff, that I learned so much. And your passion is coming through, and I am really, without further ado, excited to start this conversation. So welcome, thank you so much. Maybe you can start by telling what we see in the background.
Well, this is, I live in primary eagle habitat, and that's a farmhouse, and it's kind of representative of the old farmhouses disappearing and all the trees and being replaced by subdivisions. And so that's even happening here. And eagles need trees more than anything to have a healthy habitat for them. And so this is
eagles just like humans, right?
Yep. I mean, most life needs the water, to live near the water. That's where 80% of all life functions happen. So eagles are no different. They live, all the food they get is either on the water or in the water. They get 70% of their diet from fish and about 30% from water birds, or they also might scavenge small critters, that die, like they're opportunists as well. So
yeah, I go every year. I try to go to the mountains, and this sort of quintessential picture in my head, bald eagle on the top of the tree looking into the lake. It's fascinating scene. And of course, we were talking a little bit about when you see bald eagle, everybody wants to come and take pictures and admire them. So we did touch a little bit about how you can observe bald eagles without hopefully disturbing their habitat. And you brought the story maybe that you can repeat in the Bay Area. That was, to me, it was very telling. So
yeah, I think it was about 2011 or so. A bald eagle pair nested in the Bay Area for the first time in a century. And so that story was put in the newspaper, was on the news, and the next day thousands of people show up to observe the eagle. Of course, they immediately abandon the nest. So you really need to stay a quarter mile to a half mile away from an eagle and watch them with a spotting scope or binoculars. That's the only way you can guarantee you're not disturbing them, because they're sitting in the tree by the water to feed. And if there's humans there, then that precludes them from being able to do that. And so they tend to go they find places where there's the least amount of humans. Especially the number one threat to an eagle is a human on foot. So people will walk right up to them and try to take pictures. Well, that's just going to make them fly away. And the reason that is important is eagles only can fly 30 minutes a day using their wings to move around. That's all the energy they have. So if the wind's blowing and they're able to stick their wings out and just kind of soar, they can do that. But for the most part, they have a very small window of time to get their hunting done. And so that's why they're forced to try to be where there's no people.
You know what? I had no idea about that actually. I'm kind of wondering, I'm about to maybe ask stupid questions. As a veterinarian, it's unforgivable, but is it because of the size or why it's 30 minutes a day? It's for a raptor, it's quite a limited amount of time.
Well, if you look at the size of most birds, they're 2 to 3 pounds. Even the bigger hawks are
Mhm.
maybe 4 to 5 pounds. Well, a bald eagle is 15 pounds. They have
Mhm.
7-foot wingspan, and it takes a lot of energy to pump those wings. So I usually tell people they're look at an animal like a cheetah. I mean, people are amazed
Mhm.
a cheetah can run 65 miles an hour, but they can only do that 3 or 4 times a day. And if they don't get any food, then they're done for that day. So it's the same for an eagle. They
That's
have a
why.
limited, so they typically go out like in 5 minute intervals, and they'll wait to see a fish or some food, and if the wind blows, then that's why they're popular along coastlines where you get the updraft where it hits the bluffs,
Mhm.
and they can soar along in that and cruise and look for food and not expend that energy.
Wow. That's quite fascinating, actually. That's amazing. How did you mentioned that you started really being interested in eagles about 20 years ago, right? When you noticed that, the place where you were growing up, there was no eagles, and then you saw comeback of eagles. So, uh, what really sparked your interest? Is it majesty of them, or?
Well, um, I was always interested in raptors when I was a kid, and
Mhm.
so I read about what's the perfect eagle habitat, and it sounded like a description of where our family summer home was up here in Point Roberts. But I
Mhm.
never saw any eagles. So I went to this one place where no one hardly ever goes to, and one day an eagle showed up there, and I walked right up to it, and it didn't fly away. And this it really inspired me, and it was exciting to see that eagle. And then about 7 or 8 years later, I started recognizing that their habitat was being destroyed. People weren't respecting them, and but
Mhm.
people didn't even know that they were destroying their habitat or respecting them. And so that's why I started Eagle SkyeNet. And my mission is basically to raise awareness about eagles, because they are starting to come back to places they haven't been in a long time, where people have no experience with eagles. And so if you can,
You know what?
ex- go ahead.
Mhm. No, when you were saying, that story about the eagle that didn't fly away, I had a little goosebumps. So it was like, was it a message, really from above? I don't
Yeah,
know, if you were spiritual, or I was like, wow, that's almost like, animals I think do communicate with us. And, from working with animals for many, many years, I feel like, how can you even doubt that they have awareness, and think, and maybe not at the same level, and they cannot communicate the same way, but they communicate in many different ways. And so anyway, so I was like, wow, this is really a very cool story. Hmm.
well, yeah, it has to do with the setting too. I mean, I was the only person there, and so it seems like I just tapped into maybe intuitive knowledge to be cautious and approach them in a certain way. And but since then, now, excuse me, now when I learned that eagles remember you. They know your face. So when I go, I can go there now, and eagles will follow me sometimes. Or we play this little game where I hide in the trees and they come find the view line to me. And
Wow.
most people, they walk through some of these areas, they may hear an eagle, but they're not really aware of where they are, because they're kind of masters at hiding in trees, and they see you, but you can't see them, except when they come to the beach, and then people walking on the beach can see them, obviously.
Yeah, and well, you mentioned also that their main food is fish, so
Right.
that's why I saw bald eagles, yeah, predominantly at the
And the
edge of the
reason
lake. Mhm.
Boundary Bay and Point Roberts are so significant is we have shallow water here. Like at low tide, the water is maybe only 6 inches deep, and there's a lot of pools. So there's a lot of little forage fish that are easy to catch, especially for the juvenile eagles who haven't developed their hunting skills like the adults. Only the adults can go out over deep water and get fish. The
Mm.
juveniles, they need more of the small fish at the shoreline and easier prey.
Do juvenile eagles look the same way? Do they also have the white head, or are they
No, that's
all
a
gray
good
first?
thing to know
Hmm.
because they don't get the white tail feathers and head feathers till they're 5 years old. So people
Oh,
often
wow.
think they're golden eagles because they have the brown and when they're first fledged, they have a predominantly black beak, and then it gets
Mm.
progressively yellow by the time they're 5. And
Wow.
when they first fledge, their feathers are actually longer, their tail feathers and their flight feathers, so it makes it easier for them to fly. And then when they're about a year old, they drop those feathers and get their adult feathers, which make it more maneuverable, and they're able to, fly with the speed that the other eagles do. So often people go, "Oh,
Wow.
that bird looks huge." They actually look bigger than the adults, but it's just that their feathers are longer.
Alright. Interesting. Well, of course, I'm tempted. So it's like, how do you distinguish between the bald eagle and or juvenile bald eagle and the golden eagle? And it sort of touched in our preliminary conversation a little bit about that. So, but maybe you can talk about it a little bit.
Well, it's very rare in coastal areas for golden eagles to be in around bald eagles. But a golden eagle has more of a hawkish type nose. Has more curve and is shorter, as where a bald eagle's beak is
Mm.
longer, and then it has a prominent hook at the end. And they're also a little different color, but golden eagles typically live in cliff areas and river canyons and more in the central part of Oregon, Washington, and California. As where bald eagles
Mhm.
live by the lakes, the rivers, and the ocean, and up here in the Puget Sound where the fir trees are right at the beach level. So
So one of the things, so Jeff and I know each other through Jeff's wife, Kimberly. I was sharing with Kimberly that in my veterinary days, wasn't able to find it, but during my veterinary days, I worked with uh, organizations who actually rescued wildlife, and we did get quite a few birds. So I'm thinking, I think it was probably a golden eagle that I have a picture, holding holding a huge bird on my forum. Yeah, but raptors are fascinating actually to work with. Obviously, you have to be very, very careful. I don't know. I think that there is a story that you rescued quite a few birds. So if you can talk about that a little bit, and I also want to come back to your origins and how that whole interest in nature started. But what tell me the story about the rescuing. Why did you have to rescue the bird, and what can we learn from
well,
not doing certain things perhaps as humans?
Well, if you ever seen eagle talons and been around an eagle, they're pretty formidable. So there's a technique to capturing them, and
Hmm.
you either throw a blanket over them, or you get a big fish net and put that over them. But you have to have big leather gloves on because if those talons will just go right through
Yeah,
your
they're
skin.
huge.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
huge, very strong.
Hmm.
And so back in December, with COVID, we have a raptor center just all across the border in Canada, and we work together to rescue the eagles here because it's too far away from the U.S. mainland for them to come rescue the eagle. And
Hmm.
so I had to get the eagle and take it to the Canadian border. So I we captured the eagle. I wrapped it in a blanket and I'm holding it in my arms, and I'm walking from the US side over to the Canadian side to hand it off to them. And all of a sudden, this eagle decided it didn't want me holding it anymore. And I was amazed at how strong this eagle was. I mean, it took all my strength to keep it from getting away from me. And but eagles,
it didn't lift you up, did he?
He didn't what?
It didn't lift you up, did it?
No, because I had its wings bound, so it was like trying to get its wings free and pushing against me, and I'm holding it with like a big loaf of bread, and
wow.
So they get lead poisoning, they get electrocuted on our power lines. Sometimes they get hit by cars because they'll be feeding on roadkill. And eagles, you know, they're not very quick starting out. And they missed most of the 20th century. So cars are totally alien to them. So, but last year there were, here in the Fraser Valley, there were 800 raptors rescued, about 200 bald eagles. And I'd say probably a quarter of those don't make it. But what's rewarding is when they take 3 months, 4 months, 5 months to heal, and then we release them. And that's a very joyous occasion. Everyone comes and the eagle flies free. And this one eagle I rescued a couple summers ago, he got electrocuted, but he survived. And I found him in a drainage ditch. And so he was rescued. And then the following spring, I was out walking on the beach, and that eagle came and landed 10 feet from me. He remembered who I was, and I was the guy who rescued him. And I had my camera and I got a picture of him. And I named him Shadow because he still had some dark feathers in his head. He wasn't all white yet. So, those are the kind of things.
Well, I guess that's how you recognized him, right?
Yeah, right.
That's how you recognized him,
Well, I recognize the adults because eagles live in territories, and they have specific trees that they perch in. So if an eagle from another territory comes in and perches in the wrong tree, the mate of the eagle knows immediately that that's not his mate, and so he'll get attacked. But yeah.
Wow, I wish I asked you before to get some pictures. I mean, I was like, this is one of those conversations that I need some tissues, honestly, because it's very inspiring, especially it's so rewarding.
Yeah, well, you can post a link to my website. There's plenty of pictures there, and I'm posting pictures on Facebook all the time. I go out 3 to 4 days a week, monitoring and checking on them, and I take pictures and video, and I'm working on a short 20-minute film now from a couple hours I spent with them in a winter snowstorm. And it was really interesting to see how they were able to still go on with all the snow and wind going on.
I mean, the snow is natural, right, for their habitat, or they used to snow. Is that correct? Because in the Sierras, it's snowing all the time. I mean, every winter, hopefully. Climate change, you never know.
Yeah, well, what the other thing that is good to know, especially people in California, they only see eagles in the winter. They probably go, well, why is that? Well, in the winter, all the rivers and lakes up in Alaska, the Yukon, BC, all freeze. So all the eagles that live up there fly down south to wintering locations here. Some go to California. They spread out all over the Western United States, and they come here for the winter, and then they go back in March. I mean, the eagle can fly 200 miles in a day. And this is an eagle, like, he doesn't just, if he wants to go more than like a mile or so, he doesn't just fly there. He'll spiral up in the sky till he gets to a certain elevation. And then he just tilts his wings and coasts, and he can go, 50 miles like that. And so they migrate, from here, clear up to the Yukon or clear down to Southern California. And mostly uh, there's a nest in Big Bear. When I lived in San Diego back in the mid 2000s, there was a lake east of San Diego where an eagle pair nested there. And I at first I didn't believe it. I go, what, an eagle down in San Diego? That's just
So
crazy.
far, yeah.
But I went out there, and so I was kind of trying to figure out, well, where are they nesting? And so I looked at the trees. I go, well, probably in this area. So I pulled off the side of the road, and I'm looking down at the lake, and I had this feeling like I was being watched. And I looked over my shoulder, and there's a bald eagle right in the nest. And I just got my camera out and photographed it. It was amazing. But the same thing happened to that eagle that happened in San Francisco, is that people found out about it, and all these people went to the nest trying to find feathers, trying to get a picture, whatever. And so it abandoned that nest and had to go further away to where people couldn't get to it.
Yeah, and it was actually, I don't know if people know, I mean, the Sierra Club audience and people who are engaged, I think, might know, but it's pretty much true about, I think, any bird, and correct me if I'm wrong, but birds would usually abandon their nests if you go and, especially if you touch eggs or touch babies, because most of the birds will abandon it. And we talked about it before a little bit, that how good intentions sometimes lead to bad consequences. It's one of those things that marine mammals also, and it really applies to probably all wildlife, stay away. And especially, people try to rescue pups, sea lions or seals. And first thing that everybody should know, if you see a pup on the beach, don't touch it. The mother is somewhere close by hunting probably for that exact pup. And so be careful with wildlife, unless it's absolutely clearly injured and cannot sustain life on its own. Then of course, try to help, or better yet, call some organizations within the area who know how to handle wildlife and who know how to capture bald eagle or any other bird. You're right, because you have to use a towel or something that you can cover the wings, so you when the bird is struggling. With raptors, it's true. I mean, their talons are scary, quite frankly. I mean, they really can injure you. I mean, if you don't have proper equipment, they just go right into. I mean, I did have proper equipment, but I just know that if I did, and I was like, oh my God, this is really, you have to respect the bird for sure. And the beaks are also, I mean, so they can take whatever flash out of you. So you have to be careful, but also you have to be careful you don't break the wings, because if they start struggling, they're afraid of you, then you can easily injure them more than you're helping them. So anyway, I just decided to share a little bit of knowledge that I gained from my veterinary years, but it was always exciting to work with this. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's good stuff to know. I mean, that's why they tell people, don't you try to rescue an eagle, call somebody who has experience doing it. And it kind of started that way with me. I would go out, I would help the person catch an eagle, and you kind of learn the techniques and how to do it. And so last month I actually captured my first eagle, and that was pretty exciting but the thing you go through in your mind is, you're going to stress the bird out by capturing it. And so you don't want to do that, but you recognize that you have to, because you have to get it to be treated or it's not going to survive. So there's kind of that mesh point where I'm sure with a veterinarian, you have that same thing where you have to hurt the animal to help it. And that's a hard thing to do sometimes.
Yeah, it is, and that's why I think that sometimes people also put some blinders on birds' eyes, but it's probably not as applicable to raptors, because they are hunters. But with small birds, especially, who are bird that is prey, you also have to be careful, because they have a natural reaction that they just die out of stress.
Right. Yeah.
So if you stress them too much, you actually, yeah, getting into the that territory of killing the bird. So you have to be careful how you approach it. Now, why did you capture that bird months ago? What happened?
It was in a territory fight. So the one thing that's happened is all the suitable eagle habitat and nesting territory is pretty much gone. So as new
Mhm.
eagles become adults, they either go without breeding or they come in and they challenge the adult at the existing territory. And so you get these territory fights. And um, so the one, it had a gash on its leg, a long gash, and it's been in recovery now and it got infected. So they're trying to get the infection out of it. And so it's slowed down their recovery. And it's not something you see
Wow.
all the
And it's
time,
mhm,
but it
mhm.
does happen periodically. And usually if a single adult comes in to challenge a pair, the pair will go after and attack it as a team. And so that way
Wow.
the eagle won't even try. And the other thing I learned about
Uh-huh.
eagles is that the juvenile eagles, when they leave the nest, they're allowed to fly around in the territory and in the nest tree, in the major perch trees, until the following year, 2 weeks before
Mm.
the new eaglets are going to fledge. The eagles clear the airspace. They don't allow anything to fly. You won't see any crows, any hawks. And so if they have a juvenile from the previous year hanging around, then it has to leave. And if they don't, they only have eggs, successful eggs, about every other year. So I've
Oh.
seen a lot of juveniles stay around for 2 or 3 years because the adults didn't have any new eaglets, so they didn't drive them away and allowed them to stay in their territory.
That almost sounds like human babies, you know.
Yeah. Well, I
Go
also
out to college.
well, there's two kinds of parenting. Some eagle pairs, the female will stay in the nest, and the male does all the
Mhm.
hunting. And other pairs, they'll trade off. One will
Wow.
hunt, and then so it was kind of funny. I'm sitting there watching this one pair one day, and the male comes back and lands in the tree, and the female is obviously not really happy with it because she feels it took too long to come back, and she's squawking at it, and she flies off, and she's totally mad, and it was pretty funny.
That is funny. I didn't know that. Now, bald eagles stay as pair for life, or do they switch partners?
I would say most of them do breed for life, but their fidelity is more towards the territory. Like we
Hmm.
had a nest last year where the female got too close to electric wires, electrocuted, and uh, so in 3 days the male had some females flying around his nest, and they uh, kind of did a little competition or whatever, and this one female, so he got a new mate within 3 days of losing his mate. But and then, like I say, sometimes an eagle may come in and take over another, like the
Hmm.
female will come in and kick the other female out, or
Wow.
if a so, but that's rare. I mean, I would say that's less than 5% of all the nests. Stuff like that happens mostly year to year. It's the same eagles, and that's, I tell people I know the eagles. I give them names, and they go, well, how do you know which ones they are? Well, because what territory they hang out in, what
Territory.
trees they're in, how they act around me. An eagle that knows me will fly right up to me or fly around me, as where an eagle that doesn't know me won't come near me. So, and we get
Wow.
a lot of eagles transit through our area each year when they're flying north and south, because we're on Boundary Bay, which is the #1 bird habitat in Canada, and the #1 stop along the Pacific Flyway that goes from Alaska down to the Salton Sea.
Wow. How exciting. I'm going to come and visit. Kimberly, get ready when the COVID is over.
Yeah, well, you
I would love
should.
to see that. You know what? I actually, I don't know. I'm curious. So like that sort of disturbed me. When female died. Now, if female dies and another one comes in, does she sort of take over the nest with eggs and raises babies as her own, or because usually male species, they destroy, like lions kill the cubs of other lions, so I'm wondering if that's similar dynamic here with females exchange or.
No, eagles are very human-like in that sense. They've even been known to raise red-tailed hawks. They've captured
Wow.
a red-tailed hawk, brought it back to the nest to feed to its young. The red-tailed hawk lays its egg because it's under stress, and the bald eagle sits on that egg and will raise that as a hawk along with the two baby eaglets. And then another guy told me about
Wow.
this guy up in Alaska. He was photographing this eagle pair, and someone shot the female right as he was photographing it, fell to the ground dead. And the eagle stood on the branch. And see, the eagle can't leave the nest because the eaglets are small, and if they are left, then ravens or hawks or will come and take them to eat them. So this eagle stood on a branch and called for 6 hours, and finally a 3-year-old female juvenile eagle showed up and assessed the situation, went and got food and brought it back to the nest so they had
Wow.
something to eat. And the big difference between humans and their young and eagles is eagles will protect their young, but if it gets to the point where they're in physical danger, then they will abandon because they know they need to live another day. They can lay more eggs. But so they, as we're a
Wow.
human, we'll protect our child, to put our lives in front of the child. Well, the eagle won't go that far. But it's also a reason, like with herons, eagles don't attack herons. What they do is they wait till the spring and they get some of their babies when they're on the branches. So herons will actually nest close to an eagle's nest because they know, yes, that pair of eagles will get a few of their babies, but that pair will keep all the other eagles from coming and getting the rest of the herons. And so there's kind of a relationship there that is real subtle.
Symbiotic behavior, right? Essentially, I
Right.
actually also didn't know because the herring it nests also must be really big. I never seen one actually. I've seen stork. We have a lot of storks in Russia, which are amazing. Really, if you don't know what I mean, what stork is, but some people
Yeah.
might not because they're not that typical in the United States, I think. But they're absolutely amazingly beautiful creatures also, and nests are humongous, and they usually anyway, this is really beautiful bird. So but I've never seen a herring nest, so I'm assuming they're big also, right?
Yeah, they're not as big as eagle nests, but they're decent size. And they
How
usually
many, I
they
mean,
nest in colonies too. So they'll have a bunch of nests in one tree. As where an eagle, it's just one nest. And they often build alternative nests, and they may move from one nest to another. They can go as long as 14 years between going from one nest to another. And we don't really know why they change nest, but usually when they pick a location for a nest, it's under certain circumstances, and something may change. A new house goes in, a new road, or something that will be new that will disturb them. They don't like that, so they'll move. But the trouble here is the nests are so close together that they don't really have the opportunity to go to a different, it's just a small little area where they can get nesting trees. As where, like in Central Oregon, nests might be 3-4 miles apart because they're on rivers that don't have as much waterfowl and birds and food for them. So they spread out. As we're here, there's an abundance of food. So they're kind of packed together. And the Fraser Valley is probably the biggest urban eagle habitat in the world. I mean, there's nothing like it. mean, at our landfill, you'll see between 700 and 1,000 eagles on a daily basis in the winter. And here at Point Roberts, there's days when there's 200 to 300 eagles at a time here. And
wow.
So it's all
well, and you mentioned, I just wanted, yeah, I just wanted to make sure we're talking about eagles, not the herring, because
no, I'm talking about
by
eagles.
the way, I do have a little bit of a, yeah, no, I know, because we switched for a second, so I was like, I think we're talking about eagles, the distance, and but you know what, I want to come back to, I mean, you grew up in Point Roberts, right?
Well, I spent my summers here, but yeah, basically grew up here.
Yeah. Well, and you also mentioned that when you were growing up, you haven't seen bald eagles were in Point Roberts, right? So
well,
what do you?
Well, back in the early 20th century, people started shooting eagles because they were blamed for not enough salmon. So in 1917, Alaska, we weren't killing eagles fast enough, so they started a bounty, and they started paying people to kill eagles. So you'd kill an eagle, cut off its talons, you turn its talons in, they give you $1. And so people started killing eagles for cigarette and beer money. And so I was mystified because, like, okay, well, how did that impact the eagles where I live and clear down to Seattle? Well, all the fishermen would come down here in the winter and they'd kill our eagles and then take their talons back to Alaska to get the. So in 1963, a Canadian eagle expert got in a plane and flew from Vancouver, BC down to Seattle, and he couldn't find one nest. So there used to be between 8,000 and 10,000 eagles in the Salish Sea up here, and now there's about 1,000 pairs. So we're about 10% of what the population used to be. And I tell people, like look at Julius Caesar and Shakespeare. He talks about eagles eating out of people's hands. And now eagles are scared to death of us because when they see a person on foot, they don't know if that person is going to pull out a gun and kill them or what they're doing. And as recent as 1978, half the eagles found dead were dead from being shot. So that problem has gone down, but the eagles have retained the consciousness. And so even though they're the dominant bird, they'll keep the most distance from humans of any other bird.
And you know what? You're talking about it. It's just horrifying what what are we doing to animals and natural habitat in general. It's just not to mention, I mean, just the cruelty of it. And I keep thinking to myself that it's a bald eagle. It's the sign of United States, the freedom, the liberty for all. If we're doing that to a bald eagle, then what are we talking then about, polar bears and all the other species that people think that, insignificant, but also how important to share stories like that, because there's so much misconceptions and misperceptions about how habitats work and how much we deplete our own resources with, changing habitat and therefore depleting our salmon population versus eagle. I mean, seriously, how much fish one or even 10,000 eagles can catch? And it just to me, it's ridiculous, and one thing, so what happened between now and when the eagle population, yes, it's 10% of what it was, but it's still 10%, it sounds like, more than 20 years ago. So what started happening? Did some laws come into effect, or what changed that started to bring the population up again?
Well, in the Western United States, 7 states banded together and they started programs to protect eagles. So they started keeping distances. You couldn't get within, so you made it illegal to cut down their nest tree, their alternate nest, made it illegal to put development too close to them. And we did 30-year studies on eagles. We learned, what they could tolerate and what they couldn't. But the most important thing is we mostly stopped shooting them because it made it illegal to shoot an eagle. But you still get—
What a concept, right?
Yeah, well, you still get, 10% of the people that call eagles government crows because they're protected by the government. They're going to go kill them because they don't want someone telling them, you can't tell me what to do, type of thing. And so, but that's not the majority of people. And so what happened in 2007, they were taken off the endangered species list. And here in the Salish Sea, 10 years ago, we had 60 species that were on the endangered list. Now that's doubled to 124 species. 10 years ago, there were 10% left of our salmon runs, and a third of our salmon runs are totally extinct. Today, we're at 4 to 6% of salmon runs. So our orcas are starving. Eagles are, all animals are dying out because the food. So I tell people, if you want to see the effects of climate change, you can see it up here. 70 to 90% of all diving birds were lost by the year 2000. And so the government really can't protect them. They can't protect the environment. It takes all of us banding together to, try to work towards some solutions. But all the environmental laws have all failed. In 2007, they started a organization up here called the Puget Sound Partnership, which was like a homeland security, but for the wildlife and the habitat up here. And they set all these goals, and they were going to restore the sound by 2020. And they were going to get the orca population up to 95 whales. Well, just the opposite has happened. The whale population is down to 72 or 73, the lowest it's been since the 60s when SeaWorld came and took a big chunk of whales to put them in their theme parks. And so it's frustrating for me because, there's things we could do that aren't that difficult. But it's just, there's so much going on now that it's hard to get someone to care about a bird they don't know and don't really see. But they used to, when they studied habitats, they studied the top predators, because their philosophy was, well, if the top predators are healthy and doing good, that means the whole food web behind them is doing good. Well, now that the food web is getting, like the herring population here crashed and the salmon population has crashed. Well, there's 200 species that depend on salmon for part of their, food diet. Right. So it's a cascading effect, and you can see it happening in real time up here.
Oh my God, I have so many, thoughts firing also that, of course, the salmon is now like one of the top foods that have been advertised for humans, that salmon, eat salmon almost every day because omega-3, omega-9, in your diet is so important. I have to say, I'm guilty. I love salmon and I eat quite a bit of it. So, but I guess the story there, not to, it's like, don't stop eat salmon necessarily, but look at the fisheries. I just saw somewhere, I wasn't even looking for that specific statistics, but the overfishing is huge. The resources that we waste in our food consumption is just absolutely stunning to me. And of course, it has effects on both ends. You overfish, you overgrow, then this food spoils and we dump it to, and produce tons of methane from it. But I think that also, no, of course.
Well, before the settlers arrived up here, the natives, they would catch the fish in these fish traps at the mouth of the river. So they knew that the salmon would, every 4 years, they come in, they swim up the river and they spawn, and then you get new salmon. Well, they
Never die.
understood, they
Mhm.
understood that we have the power to destroy that cycle. And so they learned that a particular fish run, let's say, lasted 5 days or 6 days. Well, they would let 2, 3 days of salmon pass through. So they knew that 50% of that run would get through to, lay their eggs and start the process over. Well, we came in, we built fish traps, and then they outlawed fish traps and they started catching fish from boats. So boats are scattered everywhere. No one really has any idea how many they're catching. And so, they would guess how many fish would come back each year, but they didn't really know. And so it's gone steadily down for the last century. And now, like I said, we're down to 4 to 6% of that's all that's left of 2/3 of the salmon runs. So we need to go back
Yeah,
to that type
yeah.
of, number one, we don't need boats out there polluting the water, causing noise. And when we can catch them at the mouth of the river and accomplish the same thing. But it was just, it wasn't a big deal when 10,000 people lived here, but now we have 7 million people. And the predator prey model only works when the prey vastly outnumbers the predator. Well, we've reversed that. Now there's less prey than we are. And so that's the out of balance part. And that's what people are trying to get to, but it's very difficult because we're on this endless growth strategy that never lets up.
Well, I think that also it's not just the growth, the population growth, and that's sort of a big discussion, but it's consumption. If everybody took only what they really need, for healthy, nutritious, a life, I think that it would be a completely different story. But we are constantly, I'm sorry, I'm not a huge fan of uncontrolled capitalism. It's not a secret to anybody. I think the markets do not regulate themselves. I mean, I'm sorry, but look at Texas, that's a separate story, but still, so you really need, capitalism, I think, just like any other system works when people have values, morals, they understand how the world works. And the world works, if you talk about what is real and what is actually there, the world is one interconnected system. Everything is connected, and we are part of that planet. And it's like one of the things that I just heard recently and just stuck with me. We're borrowing this body from the planet. We're borrowing this for our life, and then we go back to the planet. And I think that disconnect, that I think especially the Industrial Revolution created, that humans are somehow separate and do not belong to the ecosystem, I think is detrimental to us. And I think that what you're doing is so important, because when people hear the stories that they can connect to, that they can sympathize, the stories that you told just now, I was like, wow, eagles are such a complex species, and they have complex behaviors and emotions. Clearly, that I think people start to wake up to the fact that, hey, we are much closer than one might think. So I really appreciate your work. Something that I'm really always interested, because how we come to what we do is formed in our childhood and our life. So I'm wondering, because we clearly need more people like you. We need more people who care, who take the time to help and educate others. So what would you say, what did you do in childhood, or what sort of woke you up in that awe of nature and care for nature?
Well, I was lucky enough. I grew up near a forest, and so my playground was a forest. And so I think that put an imprint on me. So later on, when I moved to Los Angeles and lived in San Diego, after about 3, 4 months, I would start to feel the sense of getting back into that environment. And I found that I missed it. And so I think it starts that way. I think we all used to be connected and living out in the wild. And so when you move into the city, there's no wildlife. You get caught up in your career and your life. And, that's totally normal. And for me, then I got older and all the things I was getting from the city became less important. And then, so, we used to have the phrase, get back to nature. And someone would go walk in the park or go walk in the forest. But when I walked there and there was an eagle there, and I got this connection with that eagle and I started learning about that, then that made that more powerful for me. And then I saw that, they weren't being respected and that they needed help. And so I said, well, I got nothing better to do. I'm going to try to help them. But I think, if you is paying attention, Teddy Roosevelt was probably the only president who really understood our wildlife. That's why he's the one that started all these parks, because he recognized that if you don't protect areas, someone will come in and cut down all the trees, kill all the deer. One of the things that's hard for me growing up in Oregon is I go out into the forests and they're not really forests anymore. They're tree farms because they clear cut all the trees. And forests have all kinds of medicinal plants and flowers, and they clear cut all the lumber trees for lumber, and then they just plant those trees back, so they grow back as a tree farm. And so I went out and I was looking for miles and miles, and you see nothing but a big tree farm. And there's only 3% of old growth forest left in the Northwest. And most of that is up around the 2,000 to 3,000 elevation. There's nothing along the shoreline. I was near Seattle a couple years ago, and I was walking in this park, and they had this big tree, and when they first got here, some of the trees were so big they couldn't cut them off. They had to go 8 feet in the air for their saws to be able to cut them. And I thought to myself, well, why couldn't they leave 10 acres here or 20 acres there of trees? Why'd they have to cut them all? Well, because they're right by the water, they're easy to get to, and it was all about just making the money. And that's what we have to try to get people to see, that the wildlife is out there, and we keep making their homes smaller and smaller. And we're to the point now where the whole ecosystem is collapsing because it's so fragmented. There's not enough to support all the wild animals, and so that's our challenge right now. And
well, and you're probably referring, and I kept thinking also about that devastating report that the UN came out with about 2 years ago, where they they communicating that the devastation that is caused all over the planet, all the ecosystems are in substantive decline. And I think that, Jeff, I'm not sure, but, this is something that I go to sleep with and wake up with. It's like, how can we make people aware, and not just aware, but really show the connection that you cannot be healthy, your children cannot be healthy, you cannot continue living the way you want to be living without understanding your connection with nature. You are the nature, we are the nature. So I'm constantly sort of like, how can we bring those stories? And also another phrase that I heard, which also stuck with me, we are not inclined to protect what we don't love. So how can we bring people back to nature and make them fall in love with it? I think that's another sort of quest. So if you have any ideas that you want to share, we talk about a lot of things what are horrible going on, but what do you think could and should be done?
well, the advice I give to people is I tell them, well, maybe you won't be able to connect with an eagle, but maybe you go connect with a pelican, or any type of wildlife. Go try to make a connection with them, watch them, observe them, learn what their life entails, and you immediately see the things we do, how it makes it hard or interrupts what they're trying to do. And it's really hard when you live in a big city and it takes you an hour to get anywhere near wildlife, and so that's a challenge because people tend to care about things that are in their immediate environment. And so it's we can do videos like this, and that's I've had a lot of success, but like even here, I feel like I reach 20% of the people and they're very passionate and they want to help. And then you get about the next 60% that, oh, that's all right, but they're kind of indifferent. And then you get 20% that hate you and think what you're doing is wrong. And someone called me a eco zombie terrorist, and things like that. And
badge of honor, badge of honor.
I'll never forget that comment. It is a badge of honor. And so, I mean, that's our challenge for a lot of things now. So, I mean, it's interesting with COVID. It's made us be totally aware of keeping distant between each other and where we might get infected. Well, that's pretty much the eagle's life and wildlife's life every day. For bears, they have to figure out where the people aren't going to be, where they can find food and not get in danger. So maybe that will help people understand that they're put in a position and how tiring and stressful that can be.
That's actually an interesting analogy for sure. It's something that I definitely haven't thought about, but that's definitely something to keep in mind. That's true. Well, and also, I don't want to speculate, but I think a lot of thought going into with climate change, how many more diseases are we gonna be unraveling, and also there's so much research coming out also, unfortunately, probably a little too late, that how much our well-being, psychological, physical, depends on the well-being of nature. And talking about immune system and resiliency and your health, I mean, healthy people are less likely to catch a disease, and they're less likely to have very, difficult course of the disease. So you can stay healthy by helping your environment build healthy, and that includes, we didn't touch on, you touched a little bit on the lead, but we talked about, hunting, right? So people don't necessarily kill eagles, but you mentioned that they kill things that or beans that eagles are hunting for. And then maybe you can tell that a little bit so people are aware, because there are a lot of hunters. Maybe some of them will watch our program.
Well, I'll even start on a more basic level than that. Some people feed rats rat poison. Well, then the rat crawls off and dies, and an owl or an eagle will come along and eat it, and then they'll get poisoned. And that's what happens with lead ammunition. Someone shoots a bird and maybe they don't retrieve it, or maybe they shoot an animal and they clean it right there and they leave all the guts, which has that the animal has ingested, or it has fragments of lead. And so the eagles get there. They just need a grain of rice size of lead, and that's enough to kill them. And so, we took lead out of paint, we took it out of our gasoline, but it persists in our ammunition, and people refuse to stop using lead ammunition. I mean, even something as innocuous as a pellet gun. Someone last year shot a mouse with a pellet gun, and of course it has lead pellet, and an eagle ate it and got lead poison and it killed it. So that's just environmental awareness. Just like we finally figured out that prescription drugs, when we put them down into our sewage system, it ends up out in the water, and our animals are absorbing those. So, and microplastics, another thing.
Yeah, and our animals, and again, circular. Everything is in nature sooner or later will come back to us, and it is finally coming back to us. Unfortunately, microplastics are found in mother's milk, now, and obviously lead poisoning is something that also another parallel. Eagle's been poisoned by lead, but Flint, Michigan, Oakland, California, we have lead poison. So there are a lot of things that are very similar that affecting animals, birds, other species, and humans. So, Jeff, it's been fascinating. I learned quite a bit. I have to say, I want to watch all your videos and share with everybody who is watching also. Anything that you want to say to people who are watching as sort of your advice or vision or whatever you want to share?
Well, I just think if you can reconnect with any type of animal and try to get some type of spiritual connection with them, that it'll really help your overall well-being and will be well worth the effort. So
I totally agree.
get in your car and get out of town.
Preferably electric car.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Jeff, it's been an absolute pleasure. I absolutely appreciate you and appreciate Kimberly who connected us. So thank you so much. I will be in touch, I'm sure of that. And thank you so much for your work and for all the education that you're doing. And I love you being in front of the camera. You're absolutely a great spokesperson. So continue doing what you're doing, please.
Oh, thank you very much. It's great to have an opportunity to share what's going on up here down in the Bay Area, where I know they have a big inland water area there too, and so we have a lot of the similar issues, and so the more we work together, the better it'll all be.
That's right. Well, thank you, Jeff, and thank you so much for tuning in for In the Know. And please join us next week. We're going to have another wonderful guest and another interesting conversation. And hopefully you learn a lot and inspires and motivates you to do even more good in the world. I know a lot of people who are watching and listening are already do-gooders. So thank you. Have an amazing weekend. And until next week. Bye.